Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would review this little video that I found very particularly interesting. And this is going to be a video once again by the channel named Dante's Boxing Nation. And in this video, we're going to be talking about the topic of Mr. Ryan King Garcia, or at least quote unquote Ryan King Garcia. Now, Ryan, Garcia, I do think overall, he still is probably the most talented, or, if I don't want to say the most talented, the most popular prospect all in all the boxing. And I do believe that he is one of the more talented prospects in all of boxing, if not debatably the most talented prospect in all of boxing. Now, some of you may ask, well, why do you still call Ryan Garcia a prospect? A certain amount of people have known about him now for a few years. Why do you still call him that? Because I can't necessarily call Ryan Garcia an elite fighter at the current moment in time because he just hasn't gotten the ring with anyone really besides that of a Luke Campbell, who in my opinion really is not an A-grade fighter. He hasn't really gotten in the ring with anyone, in my opinion, that I would really call A-grade. And that is the big question about Mr. Ryan Garcia. When is he eventually going to get into the ring with some of these A-grade fighters or with some of the big boy champions, with overall some of the big boy fighters? There also is a similar question with that of Gervonta Tank Davis. Gervonta Tank Davis, actually, at the current moment in time, he just made my top 10 pound for pound list. A big part of that is because of his skill set. When I take a look at Gervonta Tank Davis, I think that he is one of the top 10 most skilled fighters on the planet. And a certain amount of people all know may heavily disagree with me. Listen, when I just take a look at Gervonta Tank Davis, it's very obvious to me that he is a more complete fighter than the majority of the fighters around those weight divisions. The only other fighter that I believe may even be able to compete in terms of skill set with Gervonta Tank Davis around those weight divisions would be that of a Vasyl Lomachenko, maybe a Shakur Stevenson a little bit later on if he proves that he can get past an Oscar Valdez or some of those other big-time fighters. But we'll just have to see. Some people may ask me, well, what about Devin Haney? I think that Devin Haney is a very decently slick fighter. I think that he is, very talented. But when I take a look at Devin Haney, I just think that he has too many holes in his game. And I think that if he were to face, some of those guys, whether it be Shakur Stevenson, Vasyl Lomachenko, Gervonta Tank Davis, it's possible that he could get the victory. But if he got the victory, in my opinion, not only would it be because of his skill set, but I do think a big part of it also would be because of the size advantage that he pretty much has over a lot of those other guys. Devin Haney, when I take a look at his stature, he reminds me a lot of Teofimo Lopez, just with nowhere near the power. Devin Haney, when I take a look at his height and his reach especially, he's pretty much a natural 140 pounder. That's pretty much what he is. Ryan Garcia, when I take a look at him as well, he also looks like he could be a natural 140 pounder. So it just is what it is. So he could potentially beat overall, and I'm talking about Devin Haney, he could potentially beat overall someone like a Gervonta Tank Davis or a Vasyl Lomachenko. I don't think that he's more skilled than either of those fighters, but because maybe all in all, he may be able to outslick them and outreach them and keep them at a distance, maybe he could beat them. Who knows? But at the end of the day, all in all, when I take a look at Devin Haney and Ryan Garcia, I don't take a look at them on the same level in terms of skills as a Vasyl Lomachenko or Gervonta Tank Davis. But we'll have to see what they do a little bit later on. But the big question overall about Ryan Garcia is who is he going to face next? And is he eventually overall going to get into another fight that is looked at as a 50-50 fight, a true test in his career, just like the Luke Campbell fight? Now, according to sources, next, he is going to face out of a Tevin Farmer, which is going to be very, very interesting. In my opinion, Tevin Farmer, he's a decently, slick fighter. Pretty much what he is, he's pretty much like a Sweet Pea Pernell Whitaker if he didn't even have the same amount of power as a Sweet Pea Pernell Whitaker and probably was about 10% of what Sweet Pea Pernell Whitaker was. It just is what it is. That's not me trying to disrespect Tevin Farmer. I think that he's a very decent fighter. But at the end of the day, I just think that Tevin Farmer, not only do I think that, now I'm not necessarily sure how tall or how big he is, but at the end of the day, even though he does have a little bit of slickness, and although it may be a decent test for Ryan Garcia, I don't think that he's going to have anywhere near enough power or athleticism to really threaten Ryan Garcia. And on top of that, Tevin Farmer, he's not really someone, in my opinion, that even in terms of boxing ability, has a super huge threat over Ryan Garcia. So if you're Oscar De La Hoya, and especially if Ryan Garcia pretty much has had a year layoff like he has, and also, is coming off of a broken hand, in a surgery, this is pretty much the fight that you want Mr. Ryan Garcia to be in. Because Tevin Farmer, he does have a little bit of a name and claim. He was a former champion. And when it comes down to it all in all, he is a decently slick fighter. So this fight can do decent views. It can do overall, I think, a decent amount of money. But it's a perfect pick overall for Ryan Garcia in this next fight. It's somewhat of a safe pick, but at the end of the day, it is going to have some sort of appeal. But after that, Ryan Garcia is going to have to start getting into the ring more than likely with some of these other big time fighters. And I'm not even talking about the A-grade fighters. Even an Isaac Pitbull Cruz or a Jojo Diaz for Ryan Garcia at this current moment in time would suffice. And then after that, if he's able to beat those guys clearly, he will eventually have to step in the ring with one of those A-grade fighters, whether it be a Vasily Lomachenko, a Gervonta Tank Davis, a Devin Haney, Oscar Valdez, Shakur Stevenson, etc., or maybe he'll make a move to 140. Could face maybe Teofimo Lopez. We'll see what happens. But anyways, Mr. Dante's Boxing Nation is going to tell his side. Let's get into it.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So according to reports, Ryan Garcia, he's supposed to be returning in April, and the opponent is supposed to be Tevin Farmer. But Tevin Farmer, as you guys seen in that clip, the Mike Tyson clip, that was the clip that Tevin Farmer uploaded. Tevin was implying that Ryan Garcia is stalling to sign the contract, and he's waiting for him to sign the contract. Now, let me go ahead and surmise everything, just so you know how we even got to this point.
And a certain amount of people may ask me, well, do you think that Tevin Farmer has a legitimate chance of beating Ryan Garcia? Because there's some people I don't know that, of course, have this opinion of Ryan Garcia, that he's just a complete hype job, and there's some that have the opinion of him that he's going to be the eventual future. Listen, what I'll say is this. Ryan Garcia, I think that he's more than a hype job. I think that if he would have been a complete hype job, at least the way that some other people think, I think that he would have lost to Luke Campbell and not looked anywhere near as impressive as what he did. Yes, he did get knocked down, but he got back up and he was able to dominate the rest of the fight, and he was able to do something that even former, somewhat unified champions like Jorge Linares and Vasily Lomachenko were not even able to do. He was able to stop Luke Campbell, and he was really able to put him overall through the ringer. So Ryan Garcia obviously has some talent. I don't think that that's the question. The big question is, all in all, will he, beat a Vasily Lomachenko, a Gervonta Tank Davis, a Devin Haney? Will he beat those guys? Time will tell.
So originally, we were hearing talks of Ryan Garcia fighting against Isaac Pitbull Cruz. But Team Garcia, they end up passing on the Cruz fight because obviously it was too dangerous of a fight. That was the perception when it comes to Team Garcia. They felt he wasn't ready for Isaac Cruz. I remember 3 years ago, Oscar De La Hoya, I played the clip for you guys. Oscar, who promotes Ryan Garcia, he was asked by a reporter if Ryan was ready for Gervonta Tank Davis. Oscar De La Hoya said, and I quote, "No, man, Gervonta Tank Davis is a beast." 2 years later, right after Ryan Garcia's win over Luke Campbell, Ryan Garcia's trainer...
Let me say this. I don't think Ryan Garcia is ready for Gervonta Tank Davis either. And to be honest with you, I think that might be the potentially worst matchup for Ryan Garcia out of all the big fights there. I think that maybe there's a chance he can handle Devin Haney. He may also be able to handle Lomachenko because Lomachenko, even for how skilled he is, even for his non-for-real skill set, it's very obvious that he does not have the punch resistance of some of those other fighters at 135. And because he's a little bit outsized there, even debatably by a couple of weight classes, just at least in terms of stature, you can tell that the punches and the height and the stature of those fighters, they just give Lomachenko a lot of problems. So Ryan Garcia may be able to possibly get a win over a couple of those other fighters. But Gervonta Tank Davis, he's really overall the most complete fighter that I see there. And a certain amount of people I know, they'll disagree. But Gervonta Tank Davis, not only is he debatably the biggest puncher out of all of them when it comes down to it, but he has the the best punch resistance. He has debatably the best defense out of all of them, at least debatably. And I understand that his last performance against Isaac Pitbull Cruz was not the most impressive, but I do believe that there is some substance overall behind, that little thing to where his hand was injured. So we'll see what happens. But at the current moment in time, Gervonta Tank Davis, I think that he's a very bad matchup for Ryan Garcia. But we'll see what happens.
Comes out, and his mentor, Canelo Alvarez, comes out, and they both say that Ryan Garcia is not ready for Gervonta Tank Davis or Devin Haney for at least 2 or 3 more fights. Fast forward to present day, and Ryan Garcia is not even ready for Isaac Pitbull Cruz, according to Team Garcia. The question is, when will Ryan Garcia's team feel that he is ever ready for the best competition? Hopefully this is motivation for Ryan Garcia.
Well, I agree with you, Dante, but you also should be asking the same questions with that of a Gervonta Tank Davis. Because let's also be real about Gervonta Tank Davis here. Now, they're not going to go after Gervonta Tank Davis because Gervonta Tank Davis, he's a very big asset. Like I said, he's someone that can later on potentially be the future #1 pound for pound. So right now, they're not going to go after Gervonta Tank Davis, even though he he doesn't really have a lot of big fights either. Now he has bigger names on his resume than what Ryan Garcia has, but I mean that's not really saying much. It just is what it is. You're supposed to be a three-weight division champion. You have only one debatable A-grade fight in your career, and that's over Leo Santa Cruz. Isaac Pitbull Cruz is not an A-grade fighter. Mario Barrios is not an A-grade fighter. All right, Jose Pedraza, although he was a very decent fighter at the time, and I would still say that I would give him the class of B, he is not an A-grade fighter.
To prove his team in the boxing world wrong. So as normal in the sport of boxing, as long as Isaac Cruz is not fighting any fighters on the coincidental list that is expected to beat him like Gervonta Tank Davis was, now he's a really good fighter. A very dangerous opponent, matter of fact. But the truth is, deep down, even the racist fans, they knew deep down that Isaac Cruz was a really good fighter. Now they're forced to admit it now that he is moving on.
Well, Dante, let's be real. You pull this the exact same shit, especially with fighters that you don't like. That's why with Canelo Alvarez, every fighter that he allegedly faces, oh, they're a bum, oh, they're a guaranteed victory. But then when it comes to Caleb Plant possibly facing Jamal Charlo or Billy Joe Saunders facing Demetrius Andrade, what does Dante say? Big news, guys. Big fight coming up. So once again, Dante's so full of shit half the time. But when it comes down to listen, at the end of the day, it's like this. If people overall are saying that Isaac Pitbull Cruz is a very dangerous fight for Ryan Garcia, but was an easy fight for Gervonta Tank Davis, you know what they're pretty much admitting? They know just like I do and pretty much the rest of the world knows that Gervonta Tank Davis is on another level compared to Ryan Garcia. It just is what it is. And that's why Dante's Boxing Nation, even though he won't say it out loud, that's how I know that he knows that Canelo Alvarez is on a whole nother level compared to everybody else. Because every fight that Canelo Alvarez has, there's no appeasing him. There's always some complaint, no matter overall the level of the opponent.
And fighting other people other than Gervonta Tank Davis. Everyone who tried to throw him under the bus when he was fighting against Gervonta Tank Davis, they only did that because, once again, they expected Gervonta to win, and they were rooting against him as usual, praying that he didn't win. Therefore, it became therapeutic to make excuses for why he was going to win the fight. Too easy of a fight for Gervonta Tank Davis.
Let me quote overall a quote by this one channel that I respect to a great deal, Chronicles of Judah 144. I used to watch some of his videos here and there. He used to talk about boxing, and when he used to talk about Skip Bayless rooting against Floyd Mayweather Jr., he always used to say that Skip Bayless was living vicariously, through some of these fighters overall, to beat Floyd Mayweather Jr. Basically, saying that he overall, he kind of is a mega fan of them, and he's really hoping that, basically he's living his life overall through them, hoping that they can whoop Floyd Mayweather Jr.'s ass. That's the same thing overall that Dante's Boxing Nation does with Canelo Alvarez.
Too dangerous of a fight for Ryan Garcia. We know what time it is. Instead of just being honest like an Oscar De La Hoya who's been in the ring and who has fought the best competition, instead of being honest like Oscar De La Hoya and just say, man, that Tank Davis is a beast, I think he beats Isaac Cruz.
People always put Oscar De La Hoya on such a high level when it comes down to it. This dude is one of the most overrated boxers that I've personally ever seen. Don't get me wrong, Oscar De La Hoya deserves respect, but you don't know how many people I actually try to put Oscar De La Hoya on the top 10 level of all time. This dude pretty much lost every big fight in his career. Now, I give him credit, he was able to beat Chavez, but Chavez was not naturally his size. Nowhere close. Chavez was a natural 135 pounder at most. De La Hoya is a natural 147 to 154 pounder. You're supposed to win that fight. And then, of course, you ended up getting the fight over Sweet Pea Pernell Whitaker. A lot of people, first of all, thought you lost that fight. And secondly, when it comes down to it, you're also supposed to win that fight as well because it was a 50-50 matchup. But when he started facing fighters that were not only just similarly gifted, but similar in size, he's like a Bernard Hopkins when it comes down to it. He lost a lot of the bigger fights in his career once he really started facing fighters that could compete with him in terms of athleticism and could compete with him in terms of size. It was the same thing with Bernard Hopkins. That's why when I say Oscar De La Hoya, when you talk about his greatness, he's on that same level with Juan Manuel Marquez, Miguel Cotto, Sugar Shane Mosley, Bernard Hopkins, and maybe Eric Morales and Marco Antonio Barrera, if you want to put them in there. All those fighters, you put their names in a hat, whoever you draw out first, second, third, fourth, fifth, that's whoever you draw out.
They would rather, once again, throw Isaac Cruz under the bus to try to discredit a Gervonta Tank Davis win. But the truth always comes to light. And now that Isaac Cruz has gotten this big opportunity to fight against Gervonta Tank Davis, he's going to get a lot of options to fight the top lightweights. And then we're going to get to compare how they will do against Cruz versus Gervonta when he only had one hand. It would have been nice if Ryan Garcia would have been one of those fighters that we can compare to Gervonta Tank Davis's performance against Cruz. So even though Ryan Garcia versus Pitbull Cruz would have been a bigger fight, especially since we would get to compare how Ryan would do against Pitbull compared to Gervonta Tank Davis, this Tevin Farmer fight, if it comes to fruition, is still a good fight, at least considering who they were trying to give Ryan Garcia before. There were talks that instead of Ryan Garcia fighting against Cruz, he'd be fighting against a very washed up Mercito Gesta, a fighter I didn't even know was still fighting today. Ryan Garcia, he came out and said he will not be fighting against Mercito Gesta next, which was great news because nobody wanted to see that fight. Now, when it comes to Tevin Farmer, he hasn't been in the ring in 2 years since his loss to Jojo Diaz, and Ryan Garcia hasn't been in the ring for a year. So they're both coming off of long layoffs. I don't know why they're stalling when it comes to the contract being signed. I truly believe DAZN is now putting a lot of pressure on the majority of their fighters to face better competition because DAZN has been losing so much money, paying a lot of their fighters so much and letting them fight whoever they wanted to. Which
Really, because I thought overall that you were saying that Devin Haney, for example, that, he was the main money maker. The zone overall when it comes down to, I don't know overall how their business is going when it comes down to, I think that they're making some sort of money because they do have some of the biggest draws in the sport, or at least they did. But like I said, we'll see what happens.
was usually a soft touch. Tevin Farmer, he is a good name. That should be a good matchup if it happens. Of course, he's not the best opponent in the world, but that is a good return bout for Ryan Garcia. We'll see if
I would agree.
the contracts get signed for this fight. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one.
I need my online degree.
But anyways, that's pretty much overall about that for Mr. Ryan Garcia. We will see overall who he gets in the ring with next. I think that a Tevin Farmer fight, I think all in all that pretty much would be the perfect fight for him to go into next. But we'll see all in all what happens. Anyways, that's pretty much all I got for today for this, and I'll talk to you all later.